This week's parashat Acharei, we're going to learn in detail the avodat Yom Kippurim, the special avodah, the service that the Kohen Gadol is going to do on Yom Kippur, with the ketoret that he's going to bring into the Holy of Holies, and the different sacrifices he's going to have to bring, as well as the special service of the 2 goats. Great detail of what the Kohen Gadol has to do. But before it does that, it starts off, why is it called Acharei Mot? Because it starts off that Hashem speaks to Moshe, Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon, after the death of Aaron's 2 sons. We're back to Nadav and Avihu again. After they died, because they got close to God, Lifnei Hashem, and they died. Okay, what in the world does Nadav and Avihu have to do with this Yom Kippur service? Why are we bringing it up again? We learned about them 2 parshas ago. We spoke about them at length. Since then, we've had laws of kashrut, tazria, metzora. We had a lot of stuff along the way. So what's the deal? Why are they bringing it back? And we bring it back for like one pasuk. God speaks to Moshe after their death and speaks about Yom Kippur. So maybe there's a deeper connection between the 2. So if you actually remember, for those that want, I can resend you. We had an old Dvar Torah discussing what exactly did Nadav and Avihu do wrong related to Yom Kippur itself. Because this idea of them bringing in the ketoret, what were they doing with the ketoret? So actually, it's a big machloket based on the midrashim, based on the Tosfot. One opinion says they brought it on the outer altar, the mizbeach hachitzon. One says they brought it on the inner mizbeach in the kodesh, and one opinion says they brought it all the way into the holy of holies, which will remind us of the Yom Kippur service. And we spoke about in the past that they actually were doing the service according to the proper halacha of first bringing in the fire and then creating the actual cloud to protect themselves inside the holy of holies, not like what the tzaddukim did, but what we actually do the halacha, and they got the halacha right, but they probably messed up somewhere else along the way. Like one midrash says they messed up because they didn't ask Moshe Rabbeinu to do that. They just did the halacha without asking. You can't just do whatever you want. Others say, if you look at the rest of the halachot by us, so there's only certain times you can go in, only on Yom Kippur, or only dressed in the proper clothes. They weren't wearing the proper clothing, or only if you're married. We know the Kohen Gadol, before he goes into the Holy of Holies, before Yom Kippur happens, they give him a second wife just to make sure that he's 100% married. And again, that's part of the issues of Nadav and Avihu, that maybe they got this one part right, this excitement of wanting to get close to Hashem and bring in the cloud the proper way, but ultimately it wasn't the right time, it wasn't done fully in the right way, and that's why they're going to have to die. But if you actually look at the language of our pasuk, they died lifnei Hashem, they died right before God. Where do we find this concept of lifnei Hashem? We find about Yom Kippur. We find later on in the Psukim, it says, Lifnei Hashem titaru. We're going to go before Hashem, ask for forgiveness, and before God, Hashem will forgive us, will purify us. So there was a certain beauty, we spoke about this in the past, but the Mesirut Nefesh, Nadav and Avihu, just wanting to get close to God, and there is a certain ma'ala, a certain ma'ila, a certain high level of that, even though in their particular case, they got a little bit too close, and they got burnt. Okay. So I heard a cool idea from Rabbi Khan that's going to take this to a little bit of a higher level. So if we look at the Midrash says in the Sifra that when they went inside there, Nadav and Avihu, lo natlu etzah Moshe. They didn't get advice from Moshe, like we said before. But then goes on the Midrash, ish machtato, and said each person brought in their personal fire pan for the ketoret. Why is it in the singular? So says the Midrash, Ish me'atzmo asu. Each one did on his own. Lo natlu etzah zeh bazeh. They didn't ask each other for advice. They didn't ask, what should we do, what should we not do. They didn't speak to each other. They just went in on their own. And when they went in on their own, all of a sudden they find each other there at the exact same time, doing the exact same thing. But says Rabbi Khan, maybe there was each one maybe had a different kavanah. Once already they're doing it on their own, maybe it wasn't all exactly the same. Okay, in the past, we gave a Dvar Torah, I can send you this recording as well, that we said that maybe what were they trying to do? They were trying to protect the kavod of their father of Aharon, because if you look closely at the Psukim, Aharon tried to bring down the special fire when they were inaugurating the temple. It's inauguration day of the Mishkan. He's trying to bring down the fire from God, and it doesn't come down. And it's only when he goes back in with Moshe Rabbeinu, only now does the fire come down, and all the Jewish people are very happy, but Nadav and Avihu says, it wasn't Aaron that did it, it was Moshe that did it. So that's when they said, we got to do something about this. So they take the fire, they run into the Holy of Holies according to this most extreme opinion, and all of a sudden the fire comes down, and now it gets lit. So they were willing to do this self-sacrifice kamikaze mission for the kavod of their father. That's one approach that we said in the past. But now let's try to do a totally different approach. Okay, so we said we're connecting it to Yom Kippur. Last time we spoke about the actual ketoret and the fire itself, but maybe we have some other Yom Kippur connections. Okay, so first off, before Yom Kippur happens, we said that we separate the Kohen, we prepare him, we teach him the halachot, we give him a wife, and we get him ready to go in. The day that they inaugurated the Mishkan, the day this happened, the Yom HaShmini, when they died, that day was a special day. And they actually had to prepare for it. And there was a week of work before that when they were preparing Aharon as well as his sons to become the Kohanim for the first time. So in a certain aspect, there was a lot of similarities between this inauguration day and Yom Kippur. And then if we want to take it a step further, if you look at the Korbanot of the inauguration day and you look at the Korbanot of Yom Kippur, you're going to find a lot of similarities as well. And the question is, maybe they thought that this inauguration day is kind of like a Yom Kippur. Because we said part of the Korbanot of Yom Kippur, of the inauguration day, was to try to fix the Chet HaEgel. The commentators speak about it at length. When they look closely at the Korbanot, each Korban is bringing a kapara for the different sins of the Jewish people, whether it was the Egel HaZahav, which was the big one, or whether it was the sin of the selling of Yosef. But the Korbanot of that opening day was bringing a lot of kapara. So they said to themselves, oh, maybe this is like a mini Yom Kippur. Maybe it's our job to go out there and try to fix things even more. We even said one time, maybe they were trying to fix the Chet of Adam Rishon. That's why they went in there with wine and the Ketoret. The Ketoret is a big part of Yom Kippur. And they felt, okay, maybe the Ketoret should be happening right now as well on this inauguration day. And the question is, was it so crazy? Were they so far off? So it's interesting because now we speak about Yom Kippur and the Ketoret of Yom Kippur. But if you go back in the Torah, this is not the first time we find this concept of Ketoret and Yom Kippur right next to each other. It's actually not the first time that we have a Ketoret, that we speak about Yom Kippur. It's the first time we go through the Yom Kippur halachot in detail. But if you back it up to Sefer Shemot, back to Parshat Tetzaveh, the very end, Perek Lamed, we get introduced to Yom Kippur as well as the Ketoret. Over there, the Pasuk is talking about, this is Perek Lamed, Pasuk Aleph, you're going to make a special Mizbeach, the inner Mizbeach, where you're going to burn the Ketoret. And then the Pasuk says, Lo ta'alu alav Ketoret zara, but make sure that you don't bring a foreign Ketoret. Don't bring something that shouldn't be there. Says Rashi, what is a foreign Ketoret? Ketoret zara. Shum ketoret shel nedava. Don't bring any voluntary ketoret. You can't do that. That's not allowed. And if you actually go down to the approach of the Chizkuni says, don't bring a ketoret zara like Nadav and Avihu did. That's the foreign ketoret you're not supposed to bring. Now here we're talking about the inner mizbeach. So let's go according to that approach. Don't bring this kind of foreign ketoret inside, just like Nadav and Avihu did. But then it says, But then it says, "V'chiper Aaron al karnotav achat b'shana." But Aaron's going to come in there once a year. He's going to bring the special blood, the chatata kippurim, and he brings this, and it brings down that but Aaron's going to go in there once a year, bring whatever korbans he has to bring, do what he has to do on Yom Kippur. So we already have this Yom Kippur Ketoret connection of that is a special day that you can bring the Ketoret. You can't bring it whenever you want. You cannot bring a voluntary Ketoret, but on Yom Kippur, Aaron will go do special stuff, and then we're going to learn by us in our parasha that part of that service is going to involve the Ketoret on Yom Kippur. Okay, so now where in the world would they get this idea that you can bring a Ketoret on the inauguration day? So if you open up to the Gemara Menachot, Daf Nun, so Daf Nun Amud Aleph on the bottom, all the way to Nun Amud Bet on the top, the Gemara there is discussing about bringing ketorets, bringing voluntary ketorets, and how you're not allowed to do that. An individual can't do it, a tzibur can't. It's a you can't do it. But the Gemara has a question. There was an exception to that case. There was a certain time where a certain kind of individual who did bring a ketoret. And what was that? They said in the inauguration of the temple, we had the 12 Nesi'im, we had the heads of each of the tribes, and they brought a special ketoret. There it's on the outer Mizbeach, but they brought a special ketoret on the outer Mizbeach. That's what they did on the inauguration day. But all the heads of the tribes brought it, except for the tribe of Levi. Actually, we're going to learn by the menorah that over there, the Aaron was embarrassed and he was sad. Everybody else got to bring a special inauguration, sacrifices and ketorets, but Aaron said, I couldn't. And God says, don't worry, I give you the menorah. But we see the tribe of Levi never brought it. Maybe Nadav and Avihu said to themselves, Moshe is like in charge of everything. Aharon is like the Kohen Gadol. We're the two next great people. Maybe it's us who are supposed to bring that ketoret for our tribe. Because you're not allowed to bring a ketoret. You can't bring a ketoret zara. It's not allowed. You can't bring that kind of nedava. But you know what? There was one day in the history of the Jewish people, and the Gemara says it was only on that day. Don't learn from other places from this one special case. But on that special time of the inauguration of the temple, the heads of the tribes brought a ketoret. So maybe they were thinking, maybe now go with the pshat that's the outside ketoret. They were saying, let's bring that ketoret just like the other heads of the tribes. It's not so crazy. This is the day that we're supposed to do it. But ultimately it was wrong. That wasn't the plan for the tribe of Levi. They weren't the heads of the tribe of Levi. They didn't speak to each other. They didn't get advice from Moshe and Aaron. Ultimately they messed up. That's not what God wanted. But it wasn't so far off. It wasn't so crazy. And actually, if you look at the Hatam Sofer, he actually writes in Torah Moshe, back on Shmot over there, he says that They weren't so crazy. Chashvu b'da'atam, they thought for themselves that on the Yom HaShmini of the Miluim, on this 8th day of the inauguration of the temple, that they have to bring Yikru Korbanam ki Yom Kippurim. They thought it was supposed to be like a Yom Kippurim. That actually there was this idea. And if you take this Gemara in Menachot, it makes perfect sense because look at the other Nesi'im, and it all works together. And if we take these ideas and put them all together, Rabbi Khan has a beautiful, beautiful Dvar Torah. So says the Midrash, we said they didn't take Eitzah Zebazeh, they didn't ask each other advice. So says Rabbi Khan, who says they had the exact same ideas? Maybe they each had their own kavanah with why they did what they did. If we look at their names, maybe their names even hint to that idea. So we have Nadav and we have Avihu. So Avihu is the first explanation that we said. Avihu comes to the language of Abba. He's there to protect his Abba. The fire didn't come down with my father. I have to go in there and for the sake of my Abba, bring down the kavod. Maybe that's why Avihu ran in. And what about Nadav? Nadav comes from the language of Nedavah. You keep seeing in the Farshim this Ketoret as a Nedavah. You can't, the halachas, you can't bring this donation Ketoret, but he thought on the 8th day, that was the day for the Nedavah. So each one's name actually symbolizes their mistake, but the intentions in each of these cases was Lifnei Hashem, L'Shem Shamayim. Actually, if you open up the pasuk in Divrei Hayamim, Divrei Hayamim Aleph Perek Kaf Daled Pasuk Bet, it says over there, "Ve'amot Nadav Avihu lifnei Avihem uvanim lo hayu lahem." They said that Nadav and Avihu died before their father. They didn't have kids. The literal meaning is they never had any children. But what does it mean lifnei Avihem? So we have two lifneis. We have the lifnei Hashem's in our pesukim. We have the lifnei Avihem that we see in Divrei Hayamim. So Aderech Drush, these are the two L'Shem Shamayim they were doing. One was for the sake of Hashem. One was for the sake for their Abba. That's Nadav for Hashem. That's Avihu for the Abba. Their names are perfect. It's their mistakes. We actually see these beautiful intentions. Shabbat Shalom.